Kevin Feige believes he can reboot the Marvel Cinematic Universe the way you reboot comic books. Now available in paperback and e-readers. Isis, Bride of Dracula. Goddess Next Door and John Haynes team up to take on the Dark Vampire in this action-packed Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Bride of Dracula in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers today. Now, Kevin Feige, the head of Marvel Studios, believes that the Marvel Cinematic Universe still has a lot of life in it, and he believes it's possible to continue to tell a lot more great stories in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And he believes that it is still possible to tell stories in the Marvel Cinematic Universe in spite of 3 years of setbacks with Phase 4, and Phase 5, not really connecting with audiences, and there clearly being a complete lack of interest in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, the Marvel Cinematic Universe has basically peaked with most moviegoers with 2019's Avengers Endgame, and with Avengers Endgame, many people who were following the Marvel Cinematic Universe basically lost interest in it when they saw the Avengers finally defeat Thanos and end the Infinity Saga. However, Kevin Feige went on to continue with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, believing it would continue to be a box office juggernaut, and with continuing on with Phase 4, starting with the movie Eternals. And with the movie Eternals, he thought that he would be able to continue with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. However, it's clear that the Marvel Cinematic Universe really started its decline with the start of Phase 3 with Spider-Man Homecoming. And with Spider-Man Homecoming, we saw several elements that started the beginning of the end of people's interest with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. One, we saw that the Marvel Cinematic Universe was getting near the end of the second act of its entire Infinity Saga with Spider-Man Homecoming, and we were getting towards the closing action with Captain America Civil War and Spider-Man Homecoming, and we were about to reach the conclusion of the story with Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. And two, we started to see with Spider-Man Homecoming a lot of social justice narratives that came from the failed reboot known as the all-new, all-different Marvel coming into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And with Spider-Man Homecoming, we saw a lot of the things that alienated a lot of comic fans come into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, such as race and gender swap characters, and we saw the creeping in of identity politics narratives. And it's these two things that basically started many people to turn away from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, starting with the movie Eternals, a movie that basically featured a team that people weren't really interested in because they were obscure characters, one, and two, people weren't really interested in Eternals because they had finally seen the entire Infinity Saga complete. But Kevin Feige continued on with his Phase 4, and as he continued on with his Phase 4, he began pushing identity politics and social justice in movies like Eternals, and also started pushing these kinds of narratives in projects as part of the Disney Plus streaming shows that were supposed to be a part of the extending of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And as we got shows like WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier, we started to see, again, more social justice narratives and even more poor quality writing. We started to see this poor quality writing start to creep in. And while the Marvel Cinematic Universe did have a hit in Spider-Man No Way Home, we were on a decline as related to quality, and that quality decline was shown as related to multiple programs in the overall Marvel Disney Plus cinematic universe, And it was also started to show with movies like Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Mediocrity, and movies like Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. We started to see more social justice narratives and more identity politics really taking the place of the source material that we got in Marvel Phase 1 through Phase 3, which were very true to the source material of Marvel Comics, and instead of the movies staying true to the source material of Marvel Comics, we started to see more social justice and identity politics creep into the content, and this is what drove viewers away from Disney Plus shows that were a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and also drove people away from the movies, as each movie that came out right after Spider-Man No Way Home had a serious decline in their box office, and this really started with Eternals, which underperformed, and the only billion-dollar movie was Spider-Man No Way Home. The rest of the movies really did extremely poorly, underperforming, and this basically led to Marvel Studios having its first major flop with 2023's Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and other programs like Loki Season 2 winding up having really poor ratings, and this basically showed that the Marvel Cinematic Universe was on a state of major decline. However, Kevin Feige still believes that the Marvel Cinematic Universe is still able to continue to tell great stories, and believes that he can find a way to salvage the Marvel Cinematic Universe, even though it had hit rock bottom with the absolutely dreadful She-Hulk Attorney at Law. And what Kevin Feige is proposing, even though the Marvel Cinematic Universe has made one of its worst programs with She-Hulk Attorney at Law, is he's proposing to go out here and look to soft reboot the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe in the aftermath of the disastrous Phase 4, and the disastrous Phase 5, by soft rebooting the Marvel Cinematic Universe with Avengers: The Kang Dynasty and Avengers: Secret Wars. Now, what Kevin Feige is proposing is to go out here and try to remove most of the characters that people don't like with Kang Dynasty. I believe what he wants to do is what is done in many comic events, where you look to go out here and kill off all of these lame, or what they call SJW woke characters, and replace them with what he calls variants in Secret Wars, and try to reset the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And what he's trying to do is something that many comic publishers do, and I don't think it's going to work. And the reason why I believe that it's not going to work is because comic audiences and movie audiences are two different audiences, and when it comes to a movie audience, most movie audiences only take exactly what you present to them, and the whole concept of trying to go out here and reset the universe by bringing back characters that we already were told were dead as related to movies is something that isn't going to fly with movie audiences the same way it does with comic book audiences. Now, with comic book audiences, we are practically used to characters coming back from the dead, because a bad writer will come out here and kill a character, and a good writer will come in and try to bring back that same character to show that that character still has some stories in them. But the thing with television and film is that those audiences really don't like those types of changes, because the audience basically in television and film, they feel extremely disrespected when people go out here and try to promote these types of fixes to the story. And an example of this, what happened with Dallas back in 1989 or 1990, when they had a horrible season, and the way they got out of the horrible season with the horrible writing was to go out here and say that Patrick Duffy's character basically had a dream, and the entire season was a dream, and he took a shower, and the entire season was washed away. Now, this was near the end of Dallas's run on CBS, and again, Dallas was a hit show from the late 70s all the way up to the late 80s, and most people didn't buy the entire Patrick Duffy in the shower scene, and Dallas basically wound up getting canceled around 1991 due to low ratings, and was canceled basically because the audience lost interest due to the horrific storylines that took place over 1989 and 1990. That basically led to the end of Dallas, and that's basically what Kevin Feige is proposing. He is proposing to try to reset the Marvel Universe by trying to bring back old, popular, favorite characters that no longer are there, and trying to reset the Marvel Cinematic Universe to a state where it can be possible to make more movies. And that's not going to work, again, because, again, film audiences, once they see this type of thing done, they really get offended because they feel like their intelligence is being insulted. You sat there and gave me a story like the Infinity Saga with extremely high stakes. Those stakes were paid off, and if you bring back these characters with variants, or you bring them back from the dead, what that's going to do is cheapen their sacrifices and lower the value of your story, because it shows that your story basically has no stakes at that point. And when your story has no stakes, it fails to answer the critical question, why should we care? And when you can't answer the question of why should we care, this takes away the resonance of that story as related to its importance, as related to that universe. So if he goes out here and brings back all of those characters that were killed, like Tony Stark, and many other characters like T'Challa's Black Panther, or brings Steve Rogers back to his youth, this basically invalidates the value of these stories as related to film, and destroys the entire credibility of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So it's not possible to go out here and soft reboot the Marvel Cinematic Universe. No, you can't do it, because, again, film and TV audiences aren't going to accept that type of thing the way some in the comic book industry did. And even today, when it comes to reboots don't have the same impact anymore, because we've had so many reboots to try to cover up from the bad writing that have plagued the comic book industry. Now, I saw what happened with a reboot back in 1995 after bad storylines like the Teen Tony storyline and the Cap armor and the awful Thor costumes of the extreme 90s, and the way they tried to reboot things was with Onslaught and Heroes Reborn. And with Heroes Return, yes, we did see comic fans come back to buy those books. Unfortunately, after making a great first impression with legendary comic teams such as Kurt Busiek and George Perez on Avengers, Kurt Busiek and Sean Chen on Iron Man, Mark Waid and Ron Garney on Captain America, and I believe Alan Davis was on Fantastic Four, we started to see people coming back to Marvel Comics believing things were going to go good. Unfortunately, around 2001, we saw Tom DeFalco leave Marvel as editor-in-chief, and we saw Joe Quesada become the editor-in-chief, then Axel Alonso, and that's when comics took a major decline, because we went from having a reboot where things were consistent to things going inconsistent again around 2001 as creative teams wound up leaving. And as those creative teams wound up leaving and inexperienced teams came on, we started to see a decline in Marvel Comics, a decline that continued to until we reached the era of the all-new, all-different Marvel. So reboots are not something that will make things viable or sustainable. And with reboots, what it does is just give a lot of creators an excuse to go out here and fail and not bring their best work. So Kevin Feige thinks he can reboot his way out of Marvel Cinematic Universe's failures the way Marvel Comics thought it could reboot its way out of the failures of 1994 and 1995 when they were trying to compete with Image Comics, and in this case they may wind up making a huge disaster because this is not something that I believe is viable, because again, reboots really are really offensive to audiences, one, and two, the audience at this point is basically burnt out of superhero movies. Now, the entire trajectory for the overall trend for superhero movies is on a decline, and whether it be the MCU or even DC Extended Universe, many of these movies have been flopping at the box office all throughout 2023. I mean, with 2023, we have seen Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania flop at the box office. We have seen The Flash flop at the box office. We have seen Blue Beetle flop at the box office. And we are about to see The Marvels, which is projected to have one of the worst openings in November, possibly flop at the box office. Moreover, we are seeing many Disney Plus shows which open to great fanfare, like Loki Season 2, having some of the lowest ratings of the history of ratings. And it's clear that as related to the trend, superhero movies don't have all the life that's left in it like Kevin Feige proposes. Now, what's happening here is something I saw happen way back in the late 80s when Star Wars went out of vogue with Return of the Jedi, and back then, at least the studio heads understood that Return of the Jedi was the final Star Wars movie at the time and let it move on. Unfortunately, Disney basically wants to try to keep investing in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, believing that there's still a gold mine there, but the audience has moved on, and the audience moved on, I believe, back in 2019 with Avengers Endgame, because it's clear to me with 2019 and 2020, I'm seeing that's where the merchandising basically peaked. And right now, as I've gone out to eBay to look at the prices of action figures, because I'm an action figure collector, prices are going soft on Marvel Legends. Prices are going soft on Marvel merchandise, and even going soft on some comics. And it's all going soft because the audience basically is burnt out as related to superheroes after sitting through practically 3 decades of superhero movies, starting with 1989's Batman, and we've had superhero movies ever since about 2008 from to now, and with Iron Man, and even when we talk about the 2000 X-Men and 2002 Spider-Man. I mean, we've practically had almost 25 plus 30 years of superheroes, and I believe what's happened now is that the audience has had their fill of superheroes. They've had their fill of CGI special effects. I mean, this stuff is the same thing all the time. The stories have basically become repetitive. The stories have come across these days like an assembly line. Everything just feels the same, and the audience basically is in the mood for something different. That's what I believe is happening right now as related to the entire genre of superhero movies, is the audience wants to move on. Unfortunately, you've got guys like Kevin Feige who still think that there still is a possibility to keep making superhero stuff, but it's clear to me from the trends that I've seen with the merchandising just dying at retail, where I'm seeing Marvel Legends going on clearance. I mean, right now they have an Avengers 60th wave and it's 50% off at Target, and I never saw that as related to my over 35 plus years of toy collecting. The last time I saw merchandise being sold 50% off at retail like this was in 1989, when a lot of kids who grew up with Thundercats, G.I. Joe, Transformers, and Star Wars were coming into adulthood, us Gen Xers, and we were putting our toys away. And that's when I saw a lot of merchandise like Robotech, Voltron, and Transformers, and G.I. Joe stuff, and Star Wars stuff for clearance in places like Lionel Kitty City and Toys R Us. That's where I saw Thundercats for $2.98, Silverhawks for $2.98, and also got a Robotech Veritech fighter for $14.99 and Robotech figures for $2.98. I mean, these figures were on clearance right now the same way they are today with Marvel Legends. And when you have merchandising not being able to move, it's an indicator that the audience has moved on. And this is where Kevin Feige is absolutely wrong about people wanting more stories. No, people don't want more stories with the current Marvel Cinematic Universe and with the continuity completely being broken by the Infinity War and in the 5-year gap, and now you had it on alternate realities and variants. It has become extremely confusing for the average viewer, and to go out here and create a secret wars to try to reset things, that reboot would make it even more confusing for viewers. So the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe is a complete mess at this point. There is no fixing it, and the only way that it can be fixed is to just put a period at the end of things and move on, because the entire superhero genre at this point is basically done. And this is where what Kevin Feige doesn't understand. You can't reboot a cinematic universe once you've damaged the overall structures of that universe. As a writer with over 25 years experience, I can tell you that once you damage the structures of your story, there is no way you can rebuild those structures, because if you take the foundations out of that universe, then the entire universe just falls completely apart. And that's basically what happened to the Marvel Cinematic Universe with the whole Infinity War. Now, when Thanos did the snap and wound up taking half the lives of the people, and we had the 5-year gap, that basically was the thing that destroyed the entire structure of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And the attempts to fix it with Avengers Endgame, with the Hulk snap and Tony Stark snap, further damaged the structure, because we had everybody brought back, but the 5-year gap was never addressed, and that basically did damage to the overall structure to the Marvel Cinematic Universe that wasn't done in the original comic Infinity Gauntlet, because when Nebula snapped everything back, it was done within, again, a contained storyline in a contained comic that did not affect the overall Marvel Universe. It was all contained in the Infinity Gauntlet comic, but you can't do that in a cinematic universe where you create structures where all the movies have to fit together. And when they went out here and made Infinity War and had Thanos did the snap, that basically crumbled the entire structure of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And when the heroes created their own Infinity Gauntlet, that helped further collapse the universe, because the heroes stopped being heroes when they created their own Infinity Gauntlet, compromising their ethics. And then you had them snapping, and again, not addressing the 5-year gap. So the entire structure has been destroyed. And as that structure has been destroyed, Kevin Feige has been trying to salvage it, but there is no salvaging it, because the structural damage is irreparable at this point. So while he's trying to rebuild this structure to continue making superhero movies and superhero TV shows, it's on again, sinking sands, and the whole structure of the Marvel Cinematic Universe cannot just be fixed with a reboot, because the whole thing with reboots is, again, yes, you will get a fresh start, but as long as you've got the same bad writers and the same architects who created the mess, all you're going to get is a mess in the future. That's what happened with the 98-2001 Marvel reboot. Yes, it went strong for a good 2 or 3 years, but eventually when editorial came in and decided to bring in new bosses who didn't have experience in publishing, what they did was collapse the structure, and that's the reason why Marvel Comics are in the abysmal state that they're in right now. So when I look at Kevin Feige's plan to reboot the Marvel Universe, again, it's destined to fail, and it's destined to fail because the audience at this point doesn't want to deal with all of the nonsense of reboots and restarts. No, they want a solid, consistent universe that they can follow from one movie to the last. And for many people, the last Marvel movie for them was Avengers Endgame, and that's basically where Disney should have ended it. Unfortunately, they were caught up in their greed for those billion-dollar box offices that were made with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, with movies like Black Panther, Infinity War, and Avengers Endgame. And because they were caught up in their greed for box office, this is why they wanted to continue making superhero movies and believed they could continue to make superhero movies, not knowing everything had basically ended with Avengers Endgame for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and the audience basically wants to move on. No, the audience wants something new, something fresh, something different, and they're tired of the superhero movie, so any attempt to reboot the Marvel Cinematic Universe will crash because you don't answer one critical question for the audience: why should we care? Yeah, we still can make Fantastic Four and X-Men movies, but the problem is that the audience doesn't care at this point. The audience is tired and wants a break. The audience basically said that it's done with superheroes, and the audience just wants to move on. And the studios have to understand that while you think that you have some stories, if the audience says they're not interested, all you're doing is throwing good money after bad, and that's all Marvel Studios has been doing for the last 3 to 4 years, throwing good money after bad, throwing crap at a wall, and winding up with nothing to show as related to successes, because it's clear that the audience wants something different, and you have to go out here and give the people what they want. What the people want is something completely different. I believe they want a comedy. I believe they want a drama. I believe they want something fresh and unique that doesn't come from an old derivative concept. They want something fresh and different, and they're looking for something different, and that's what Kevin Feige doesn't understand. He's trying to reboot a universe to get you interested in it, but you've told all the stories you can tell at this point, and even if you bring in a new Tony Stark and Steve Rogers, people just are tired at this point. They have seen enough of superheroes, and at this point, it doesn't matter if you start with a new number one. Everybody at this point is done with superheroes, and the definition of insanity is to do the exact same thing and expect a different result. And at this point, the only result you're going to get with superheroes is a lot of people who aren't going to go buy to see these movies, and all you're going to get is the same result: poor box office and poor ratings, because it's clear at this point the audience just wants to see something new, something fresh, and something completely different. Now, if you want to try something completely different, you can try my comic John Haynes at Death's Door, which is available on Lulu.com right now in paperback. And if you click the link in the description box, you can get your own paperback copy of John Haynes at Death's Door. And if you want to pick up my other comic that's digital, Esteem No Good Deed, you can find that comic on Kindle for 99 cents by clicking the link to Amazon.com. And if you want to pick up some of my other action-packed fantasy fiction on the SJS Direct universe, like the ISIS series, the Steam series, the John Haynes series, the books of the Spinsterella trilogy, my black sorority novel, The Thetas, or my vampire novel, Eternal Night, you can pick up all of those books in the SJS Direct universe in paperback and Kindle format on Amazon.com, or you can find paperback copies at other online booksellers like Barnes & Noble, Walmart, and Target. And if you want digital versions of the books in the SJS Direct universe, you can find those on Smashwords, the iBookstore, Barnes & Noble's digital Nook format, Google Play, and other online booksellers. And if you want to see me make more videos about comics, science fiction, and fantasy, or help me to be able to publish the next XJS Direct Universe comic, you can send a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, Isis, Escape from Transylvania. The goddess next door and John Haynes must escape a horde of vampires on the hunt in this horror-filled Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Escape from Transylvania in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.